Hello, EnderSword here again with another replay from NewbieOne in the Gold League. We're looking at another one of his TvP games. His opponent is going to be whatever that is, something about pi. And we're here on Tal'Darim Ultra, so almost the exact opposite, a much larger map in this game. We're still going to see NewbieOne go for a fast expansion on this map. The three things that we're going to be looking at most during this game are macro, but a little beyond macro. Are you making the right things? Are you upgrading to the right tech units? And are you producing what you need to produce out of the facilities that you have? The second thing we're going to be looking at is scouting. What is NewbieOne's awareness of what's happening in the game throughout the game, and is he responding accordingly? And number three, towards the end, we're going to look at the concept of doing a base race. What happens in a base race scenario, and how do you take advantage of it? How do you know if you're going to trigger one, and what do you do in that type of scenario? Because that's where something kind of falls apart in this game as well. So we see NewbieOne go around, do the normal scouting, everything like that. He hasn't started any buildings at this point. So that's an indication that he is, in fact, going to go for the fast expo. He's only put down the depot and obviously no follow-up with the barracks. Whereas over on the Protoss side, the standard pylon gateway has occurred. He will, unfortunately, again scout the Protoss last, but nothing will be too shocking when he gets over there. Saves up enough minerals for the expo to go down, and he just does decide to build it right in place. He's going absolutely for the command center first. Another option that you do often see here is to create the original wall off, build the command center in base, and float it over. You're going to end up being a little bit later, but a little more well defended. Given that he doesn't have any scouting information yet, sometimes that is safer. Not knowing what your opponent is doing, this can be very risky. If you do scout them first and see that they're very passive, then you can sometimes get away with that a lot more. In any case, it doesn't end up being a big issue here. It is a risk that you can take on this map. I often take it as Protoss, just go Nexus first and cross your fingers sort of thing, but it can be quite safe. The Terran finally takes a peek around, sees kind of the standard stuff, does, however, see that there is a full wall off here. That's usually an indication of something a little odd going on. You can't get into the base. It means that he's obviously not going to push out and be aggressive at any near point, at least not until the warp gate technology is done. So you know that you have a bit of a window in which you're not going to be attacked. So you can use that to your advantage. It does work very well with the fact that he went for the quick command center, because he knows that he's going to be pressure-free for the next little while. Gets a bunker up here. The positioning of this is not really ideal. He could still be sniping off these buildings while outside of range of that bunker. You often want that as your front line. Get it right up here so that you're actually drawing the line here, and the buildings behind are a bit more defended. He could play around, exploit the Colossus range down here. He could exploit his Stalker and now Immortal range here, and just do a lot of damage while remaining outside the range of that bunker. So be aware of positioning during these times of placement. Now, the SCVs are not being produced constantly. We've got one down here, but again, the one up here is not producing anything. They are on... Only one of them even is on a hotkey, this one. So get those together on the same hotkey and be making sure that you're constantly producing workers. There should just really never be any sort of gap in the production there at any point, particularly in the early game. Unless you're specifically cutting for a specific tech path, then you just have to be pumping those out. And there's no reason in this case not to be doing that. It was not a lack of money or anything. It was just not producing them. Knowing that he's a little bit safe, this is, again, a tiny bit risky just how aggressive it is, but he ends up going for the tech labs in addition to the barracks and going right to Marauders. Really, for that entire time, to 7 minutes now, there was one Marine defending that area. Had he decided to poke out with this early force, he probably could have done some damage to these buildings, but likely could have defended in time. He took a little bit of a risk there doing so, but ends up getting away with it. Builds in front, again, these are all buildings that are just not protected by this bunker at all. So by putting those in the way, yeah, it's a little bit of a meat shield or metal shield up front, but it's better to be actually getting some defense out of the static defense that you've built. And right now this isn't doing a lot with one Marine in it and so on. It's just not really going to help you out. We see here one SCV on gas, and up here only 2 SCVs on gas. You have to be looking at that sort of thing just in case they click around. Make sure that you've got the right amounts. It does list the number that you have on that, and this one you can obviously just see it. That's going to come in play over the course of the game as he ends up being a little gas starved and probably won't realize why. Thinks he's on 4 full refineries, but in reality it's the equivalent of 3 refineries that are actually producing gas, and that really does cut into what Terran is trying to do. It's very much the gas that serves as your restriction, not the minerals because of mules and things like that. He is on 2 full base for minerals, but not for gas. 2 starports go down, again an indication that you're going to be fairly gas intensive. Anything that comes out of there is going to require a handful of gas. Plus his production here is focused on Marauders, which although they're not gas heavy, do certainly consume a bit, and obviously more than Marines that don't have anything. In terms of map awareness, NewbieOne is really not aware of anything that's going on. His initial scout is all that has occurred. He has no control over any of these towers, so he is unaware that this army exists at all. A simple poke by of this tower would have revealed that long ago. It's good to send a scout out to take a peek at what's going on there. And of course, the hidden expansion down here, he doesn't have any idea about. However, I know in his own little write-up of the game, he mentioned that the hidden expansion was a large component in what ended up killing him. However, it's important to note that he doesn't know whether there's a normal expansion. So it's not like he checked whether there was a normal expansion here and said, oh, he must be on 1 base. He just doesn't have any idea what's going on. He hasn't checked, hasn't looked in a long time, has no idea whether anything's there. At this point, you would really have to assume that your opponent is at least on 2 base and probably at 11 minutes on 3 base like you're about to be. So, just because this wasn't scouted doesn't make a lot of difference. You should still assume that your opponent has it, and you should be going around checking to see whether or not they have it. So it being hidden was absolutely irrelevant in this game, and it's no excuse that you can use to say, oh, I didn't know about that, so that's why I lost. It doesn't really factor in. We can see here he's going for medevacs, getting a Raven out, presumably for the point defense drone against stalkers, which is a good. It is underused against Protoss. It so nullifies the stalker fire that it's almost always worth its cost. It's an expensive unit, but if it just shuts down a lot of the DPS out of the Protoss army, it is good to get. However, we can see that the 2 starports are there and spend a lot of their time idle. The barracks are now sitting idle. A factory is producing. He put down 2 engineering bays to complete upgrades, but he only has level 1 attacks and hasn't even started level 1 armor or level 2 attacks, but he's added the armory so that he can continue doing fast upgrades to his army, but he never actually pursues that in the game. The starport's still sitting idle. He does poke out here. The attack that he's kind of planning is a little odd. He's this close, but still doesn't poke at this Selnaga tower. So for all he knows, there's an army right there, like waiting for him, or someone spotting this the entire way. He has no idea that there's this army in existence. He has no idea what the tech path of the Protoss is. He has no idea what is up in this area. Has no idea if there's a building that is able to perfectly spot this or anything. He only sees this tiny ridge and decides to completely split his army into this sub-force, one on the low ground, one on the high ground. If there was an army here waiting, this would be absolutely destroyed at this point. Just absolutely destroyed. By doing this drop-in, he has to realize that you're triggering a potential base trade situation. When you drop in someone's main with your entire army, you're not only saying, hey, this is a very strong attack, but you're saying, hey, I'm completely undefended. So unless you can come stop this immediately, like say the army was right here and decides to come down, if the army's out on the map at all, his only option is to go out and just kill you. Because by the time he ever got back to his own base, you would have done so much damage that he's irreparably behind. Here the Terran front does get hit, and without even taking out the Nexus, NewbieOne decides, I'm just going to truck it home and go try and save myself. You just can't do that. It takes so long to get back home. You've lost your natural. You're clearly going to lose all these production facilities. It's doubtful whether or not he could even stop this army in the first place, let alone come home, stop it, lose everything that you had, and still end up in a winning position, despite the fact that he didn't even take out the mining over here. Even if this was the only base, that would be enough, given that you've just lost all of yours. So you can't be indecisive with that. You have to know whether you're triggering a base race. There's a lot of cases where if you're just making one of those sneak attacks, just backdooring them, you're definitely going to trigger them to go kill you. So this just walks over him, absolutely destroyed. And it's a result there of a weird attack in the first place. This is just kind of a blind attack. He had no idea what was going to happen in this. It wasn't a particularly impressive force. It would have had trouble with this army in a head-to-head fight anyway. So by backdooring there, he just triggers that base race and nothing he can do about it. As a Terran player, be aware that the Protoss needs air to come actually kill you. You can just force a draw as long as you take away all his economy and all his tech. If you just destroy most of his base, he can have a pylon somewhere, but as long as you've taken out both his nexuses, then he can't ever get to the air, and you can just float to the corner and it's a draw game. People find that frustrating, but it's in your favor, so remember it. You can't back out of a base race. Once you've initiated it, you just can't recover. You can't go back home. You have to go with it. He didn't know about this bottom line, but again, it didn't matter because he didn't even try to complete the base race. So to review here, the three things were macro. He was just not using a lot of his buildings most of the time, wasn't making the right things. Number two is scouting. Didn't know what was going on. There was a hidden expo, but he didn't even know if there was a natural expo. Didn't know what the tech was and didn't respond accordingly. And number three, don't trigger a base race unless you're willing to go for it. You cannot retreat back home. Never try.